Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Megan Cluth. I am with the Center for Public Partnerships at the University of Kansas, and I am part of the planning team and one of the facilitators for this group, the Child Care Systems Improvement Team. I'm going to hand it to Melissa Schoenberger for a quick welcome before we get started.
Welcome, everybody. And we got to love this very first fall day in Kansas that feels like fall. So I am pretty pumped up because it's the first time I think my air conditioner has not ran in the last few weeks. So very excited for that. Thank you all for joining. I know there were some other conflicts with some of our team members attending the governor's conference. So I think we still have a nice, robust group here with us today. And so again, happy Tuesday.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay. So this morning we are going to do some quick introductions. I know we spent quite a bit of time in September doing introductions because we had so many new members, which is fantastic. So I want to make sure if anybody wasn't able to attend that they have a chance to introduce themselves today. And then we're very excited to welcome Jarvis Dolman, the new Director for Child Care Licensing. We're going to have two kind of updates from the early childhood system. We'll hear about the career pathways from Hannah White with the Children's Cabinet. And then the Child Care Aware team is here to share a little bit more about the GO team, which we've talked about in the past, and the Communities in Action Summit. And then after that, we'll spend the rest of the time reviewing the survey results. Thank you to everybody that went ahead and completed that survey, and really talk about what this group is going to work on over the next few months. So with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing for a minute. And anybody who is a new member who was not able to join in September, if you can share your name and then your role and organization, if you would like, where you are in the state, and just a little bit about what you're hoping to get from the systems improvement team, that would be great. I don't know if we have new people or not, but certainly want to make sure we had the chance to hear from you. Megan Smith.
I may know many of you already, but I was not at the September meeting, so I'm going to do my due diligence. So my name is Megan Smith, and I am with the Department for Children and Families, and I am the Quality Child Care and Continuous Improvement Manager. I work with the pandemic relief efforts, but I am also helping with the links to quality, which is our continuous improvement system. And what I hope to get out of this is to continue to find opportunities for coordination and collaboration. What other pieces? I'm just excited to be here. I really enjoy participating in this group.
Cool. Thanks, Megan. Casey.
Hi there, I am Casey Kyle Wilkinson, and I am based out of Manhattan, Kansas. I am the owner and founder of MHK Play Studio, formerly IE Discoveries, for anyone that's visited. And I also work as the Director of Professional Development for Kodo, which is a national company. I have participated in lots of state systems projects and meetings over the years. And so I'm just really excited to jump back in and assist in any way that I can.
Wonderful. Welcome. Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Clausen, and I'm the Education Policy Advisor with Kansas Action for Children. I'm in Topeka, and I've spent 11 years in public ed and now have transitioned to this role. And I'm really looking forward to using this group to help build my knowledge of childcare and early learning and develop those connections and relationships with folks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Daniel. Sharon?
I'm Sharon Field with Casito. I'm a training and technical assistance specialist, but I also work with part of our collaboration grant with Child Care Aware of Kansas. And so I'm located in Salina. And I've worked in different systems parts throughout the last 15 years, so I'm excited to be with some familiar faces and be able to continue with collaboration.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sharon. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing any other hands. Okay, well, Melissa, I am going to hand it back to you then to introduce us to Jarvis and share some licensing updates.
Great. I'm going to provide a brief update on what's going on at CCL, and then we'll let Jarvis come off mute and just introduce himself, because I think he's been with us and we're going on week 5, and he has learned a lot and would like to share a little bit more about himself. But just to let everybody know that we are in the middle of just remind everybody, if you haven't, everybody is very intimately aware of what's going on in early childhood across the state, and you'd have to be under a rock to not know that KDHE is in the middle of promulgation of KAR-4114. Right now, we're still in the middle of the open comment period. We will take open comment through October 28th at 5 p.m. On October 28th, we will also be hosting our administrative hearing. For details, I encourage you to go visit our websites. If you do plan on showing up and providing testimony to the regulation, please bring it in a written form so that our agency can collect it. We will also be hosting an additional webinar for home providers that was distributed through surveyors to entice them if they have any more additional questions on October 24th from 6 to 7. And today we will be actually presenting in the proposed amendment changes to the regulation to the Legislative Regs and Rules Committee this afternoon. So we are continuing to move along with the process. I'm very excited about that. And also wanted to share that we systems improvement team also has an opportunity to really look at and dig into our regulations and what can we do to provide, dispel any barriers or help the workforce. And one of the things that we do within our own program is looking at what can we do to make our work easier. A few weeks ago, we actually looked at and launched a policy exception, if you haven't been aware of that, for preschool type programs and for childcare centers, specifically to the preschool units. We have lots of families who are making decisions of not sending their children to kindergarten. I personally was a mom who have a 20-year-old who held her daughter back a year, who was an August baby, and made the choice to make that own decision myself. So I understand that with parents. And so our program decided to provide a blanket exception to really define and increase that for specifically, we started off with our preschool facilities for those parents, because we do get a lot of exception requests. And then we just translated to that to, well, if this is happening in preschools, it's probably happening the same in childcare centers where parents are trying to make those decisions. So I was really proud of our agency and specifically our program to provide that blanket exception. We've received nothing but positive feedback from facilities, especially from some specific preschool facilities who are serving children. And in the actual comment, the last that I had received was thank you. Through the pandemic, kids are not quite ready for kindergarten, and we really appreciate what you are acknowledging as a program. So it made me feel really good about what we're doing. So if you weren't aware of that, it is now on our website. We distributed it to all of our surveyors and all of our licensed homes and centers. So again, always love the challenge of the CIT team because it's always making us look at our program and what can we do to provide some immediate relief without having to go through the whole promulgation process. So those are some 2 big initiatives that we had going on in this last month since we last spoke with you guys. So now it is my honor and privilege to introduce our new section director, Jarvis. So I will go on mute and let Jarvis share a little bit about himself.
Thank you, Melissa. Like she mentioned, I'm Jarvis Dolman. I am in my 5th week with childcare licensing. I'm new to all things childcare licensing, new to the state. So it's been nice coming in and learning everything that's going on. Previous before this, I was at Pearl Bay Casino in the surveillance department. We dealt with a lot of rules and regulations and things of that such. So I have some background in that. This is a whole new world, like I said. So I do have that background, so it's been nice being able to transition and kind of use my lens in a different way. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to building with everyone. Looking forward to learning more about childcare as a whole and to find ways to help come up with better ideas and help the systems and processes for children in the state. And of course, looking for ways to continue to help our providers. We want to open up more facilities, but also stay aligned with our mission to ensure the health and safety of the children in out-of-home care. So yeah, I'm just here, and the more I sit in on these meetings, the more I understand what's going on and able to wrap my head around everything. And so that's what I'm looking forward to. I learn something new every meeting. So nice to meet everyone, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Jarvis. We are very happy to have you here. All right. Well, with that, I am going to hand it over to Hannah White, who is with the Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund. We have talked a little bit about the work that's been going on for many, many months now on the career pathways. And so Hannah is here to provide an update and do a little refresher for those who may be not as familiar with that work. So Hannah, take it away.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Melissa. And Jarvis, I'm very excited to see what you do in your role. And I know that you're coming into a great organization. So I think it's going to be a great pairing. And I'm really honored to be here because I always hear so much about what this group does. And I think that this lens is very important because it gets that provider voice in a way that we don't always see in other pieces of our governance structure. So really, really excited about being with this group. So as Megan said, I am Hannah White. I am the workforce coordinator for the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund. I've been working on this career pathway project for about 2 years now with KU, our backbone team, and then collaborating with you as partners in the system. So we've had shareholder input across the board from state level partners, community partners, parents, families, and then directly from providers as well. We went on two feedback session journeys, we'll call them journeys, and they were amazing, incredible, and we learned quite a bit from the field and specifically how our workforce feels about a career pathway and what's important to them. So I'm going to do a little bit of level setting here. I've pulled up the design principles for this career pathway. These have stayed almost completely the same since the beginning. So we really have tried to stay true to these principles. One of the things that I hope you really see in this pathway and the update I'm going to give you is how hard we've been working to strive for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know that our childcare providers come from different walks of life. They have different opportunities that are available to them. For some people, that's higher education. For some people, that is not. And higher education is just one example of the way that we think we've valued a variety of lived experiences on this career pathway. So just to be clear, this ugly table that I am sharing with you is not the final version of the career pathway. We have contracted with Orange Sparkle Ball, or OSB, and so they're creating a really nice visual of the career pathway, and it's interactive. This is just what we talk from. So here's some assumptions that I'm going to go over real quick. So this career pathway is not comprehensive of the childcare workforce. We believe that in the future iterations of the career pathway, we could include supportive services like home visiting, childcare health consultants, surveyors, etc. But this career pathway is really for childcare providers. And so just to look at it through that lens. Another thing, we talk quite a bit on the career pathway about professional development and like community-based learning. And so when we talk about that, we are talking about KDHE approved clock hours. And I will add the caveat that we understand there's a great amount of high quality professional development that are not KDHE approved, not necessarily for any reason, but not everything can be or can have gone through that process. So for this part of our work and the first phase of the career pathway, we're talking about KDHE approved professional learning opportunities. So this is a lot to digest. And so I'm just going to give you a very high level overview. Like I said, we've been working on this for 2 years. The pathway starts off with that pre-professional. And so that's where we expect to interface with an adult that has a high school diploma or a GED. And then on the other side, that's where we will interact with a career and technical education or CTE program participant. So a high schooler that maybe is working on a CDA in a high school setting, somebody who already has an interest in early childhood care and education. So those are two of our pipelines and then kind of the beginning of the pathway. I will say that every single level on this pathway doesn't have to build on the previous, okay? So somebody could come in anywhere on the pathway and not have to go through in a progressive sequence. It's meant to be buildable if that's the way that the user would like to use it, but it's also each of these stand alone, okay? So even if somebody doesn't come into the pathway as a CTE participant at 17 or 18 years old, they can still maybe, let's say, get hired and get their CDA and be level 3, okay? So it doesn't have to be progressive. Some of the other key things about the career pathway is that we recognize, you'll see there's two kind of options for each level. So you've got one and then you have like one alternative. Typically all the way through, that first level is going to be the higher education pathway. So you see 3 early childhood credits. And then on the other side, that's where the equivalent of maybe professional learning or a stackable credential or a combination of those things plus on-the-job experience. So those are really the way that those levels are designed all the way through. Some other key elements, you can see that 1 through 3 really just build. The first meaningful point of division, if you will, is that CDA on the alternative pathway. And so that's the existing CDA at level 3. Something new that we propose that has actually been received really well is encouraging a CDA with enhancements, which is just adding in some additional support, some supportive services like coaching and participation in the community of practice for those people as they're going through their CDA. You can see here that we have the associate's degree recognized, and there's options for if you have an early childhood emphasis or if you don't. And there's a way that individual can just kind of get the most from their lived experiences, regardless of if it's purely higher education. And then you see here we have listed some of the really high quality stackable and portable credentials that we have in Kansas. So that's the director's credential as well as the national director's credential. We also have recognized NAFC accreditation on this pathway. So we're really trying to use the things that Kansas is already doing well as far as credentials and accomplishments in combination with community-based learning, in combination with opportunities for higher education, if that is appropriate for that user. You'll see that the career pathway ends at the bachelor's level. So you may have actually seen this career pathway where it was all the way through 9. So 8 and 9 used to be master's degree and then a PhD. And so we've removed that. This is an iteration that we've settled on. And the reason being, not that we don't think that childcare providers have masters and PhDs, but we think the vast majority of them are going to be represented in that other tier. And so we didn't want to water down the power of the career pathway just to be so inclusive. We really wanted it to be reflective of what we believe our providers' lived experiences are. So that's just kind of a high level overview. You'll see on the left in that kind of, I don't even know what that color is, grayish, that it shows where our career pathway could align with NACCE's Power to the Profession. So we did not do an alignment all the way through because NACCE's Power to the Profession sometimes can create some equity issues for people who may not be able to achieve, let's say, a formal CDA, higher education, et cetera. So we want to say that these standards could be achievable, aligning with Power to the Profession and ECE 1, 2, and 3 in a future state, and this is how it could look. So we do have that on the side. I am going to stop real quick because that's really the meat of what I wanted to get through. And I would love it if somebody has a specific question about an area, I can go back. So any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Hi, Hannah. My name's Kelly, and I work in the Tiny K programs. So if, and I apologize, this is one of the first times that I've seen this, so I applaud the work. On the right, where it talks about job embedded coaching, small group mentoring, those columns, are those things where if you've already completed those meet the qualification for like the ECI 3, or does this state that, for example, if you have a bachelor's or a master's degree, in addition, you have to participate in job embedded coaching, portfolios, those sorts of things?
No, so they each stand alone. And I would say that if you come into it, let's say you come into the workforce and you had some coaching that was early childhood specific, now that is relevant, or you have a long-standing history of, participating in a group like this, or maybe the workforce development advisory group, maybe you run your own community of practice in your local area, that would suffice. So it's meant to be as inclusive and acknowledging things that people are already doing. And I will say that you'll see over here where it talks about those additional supports, like coaching, like mentoring. These are things that we already know are happening in our system. We know that agencies like KDHE, Child Care Aware, Casito, we know that agencies are already doing coaching, mentoring, peer groups. We just need to find a way to formally document that and give people credit for what they're already doing. So where we're at right now is we're finishing up some, I'm going to leave, I don't know if this is distracting or not, leaving it up, I'll leave it up. We're conducting strategy sessions with our partners that are currently offering some of the supportive services that we're going to need to figure out what their current capacity is and what we may need to invest in as a system so that we can support providers moving from level to level. So that means that we're going to probably have to increase our coaching capacity as a system, probably have to increase our formal mentoring, probably have to have a little bit better idea of what groups are meeting in the governance structure, as well as less formal communities of practice that are still high quality and you have that kind of peer-to-peer relationship. So we are planning on rolling out the career pathway in phases because we want to be very fiscally responsible and we want to make smart investments. And we also want to make sure that our providers, as well as people who may be responsible for answering questions like surveyors or CCHCs, et cetera, are well informed and that they understand what we're talking about. So we're going to be slow rolling this out. The first phase will just be teaching the workforce how to use the career pathway. It'll be a flat artifact, so not something that lives online. Well, it won't be an algorithm. It can certainly live online as a flat artifact, but it won't be interactive. And then we're going to release some FAQs, some guidance for use, maybe a career guide that goes with it. And then just start kind of talking about the career pathway with the greater workforce. Long term, we have always intended to have incentives tied to this career pathway. One of the ways that we believe we can do that is through aligning the career pathway work with the workforce registry work. A lot of those things go hand in hand. So understanding what we have to offer as far as professional learning as a system is completely relevant for developing the workforce registry. There's a lot of things like that that we're going to have to do the work in tandem because the objectives are the same and the criteria are the same. So as we move through the phases of the career pathway, you'll see more and more of that integration happen, but we don't want to overload the system with a completely new product that there's nobody to help people actually use and understand. So you'll be hearing from us in the same veins that we usually talk about whatever's going on with PDG. So, look for webinars, look for our early childhood group, certainly announcements from partners. You know, Childcare Aware, for example, has a really wonderful marketing capacity where they can speak directly to families, community members. You know, they can really solicit feedback and do some targeted messaging based on the group of people that we want to talk to. So this is going to be something that, as far as messaging and marketing, we're very intentional about. We would love to get to a place where the community at large knows about the various levels on the career pathway, and it's meaningful, where a family member could go to their childcare provider and ask them about, you know, where they see themselves on the career pathway, or what it does for their professional development. So that's kind of where we're at. We're in phase one. We're working on pulling together kind of the last final pieces of that phase one launch. And then we're going to be working with the system to start educating. CCSIT has agreed to put together a professional learning opportunity, like an actual course that people can go through to learn about the career pathway, to learn about how to use it. And then there's other pieces that are still being worked on in the system. And that's kind of informed our timeline and our intentionality. So some of those other projects are the core competency work that's going on. The career pathway needs to be aligned to core competencies, as well as the work that the Workforce Development Advisory Group is doing on the individualized professional development plan. So there's a lot of really great tools and resources that are coming out the same time that we're working on this career pathway and the workforce registry. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking for a second.
Hi, I have a question about that document. I'm Natalie Gordon, and I am a parent and in the architecture industry, so I am not a practicing childcare provider. But when I looked at that chart, when I look at, like, say my company wanted to also open a daycare for my employees, or I'm working with another institution to do something similar, when I look at that, it's very confusing from an outside perspective who's not in the childcare industry. So if I want to look at what credentials do I need to hire somebody for a childcare director to get the ball rolling and that kind of thing, it'd be really great if that matrix also said this level qualifies you for these potential job positions. And so when we look at a matrix of, okay, to be a director, you need this and this, and if it needs to follow with those career pathways, which I think you alluded to, but I think whatever you need to push out, it really needs to make it simple for those of us who are trying to make a difference in childcare, but aren't in childcare. And so being able to navigate that document with very clear definitions of qualifications for different job positions would be great.
I hear that resoundingly. I hear that. So that table that I just showed you, that ugly document, is not digestible, and that's why we are paying somebody who knows how to make things digestible. And so the interactive visual is a lot easier to understand for somebody who doesn't know anything about early childhood. But secondly, I think you're absolutely right that, and one of our goals is to release not a full prescriptive career guide, but a supplement that could explain, if you do these things, maybe these are the kinds of positions that you're eligible for, and just kind of talk about some of the opportunities that are available in childcare. I think one of the reasons that we're a little bit, and I know that I'm over time and I'm almost done, one of the reasons we're a little bit hesitant to be very prescriptive is because we know that wages are low. We know that we have highly educated, high quality providers that, regardless of their personal achievements, that does not always equate to an advancement or more money or a better position. And so it's kind of a weird spot to be in, where we want to be able to explain that, but our workforce is very unique. So there's also, I got a quick question in the chat about collaboration with school districts and the CDA. So there are some alignment efforts that are happening in pockets across the state to create CDA pathways with local community colleges and articulation agreements. But those are happening in pockets. It's not happening statewide. I'll be very clear. One of the reasons for that is resources that exist in one community may not exist in another. So to have that CDA and to have that CTE experience, you have to have a lot of components. You have to have a work site, you have to have a certain type of qualified staff to do the instruction, etc. So we are hoping that one of the byproducts of having a career pathway will be those conversations with higher education surrounding articulation agreements for the CDA. This is probably a first step towards moving in that direction. Like I said, we know that specific communities are doing it, but they have usually a great set of resources that other communities may not have. So, all right, that is all I have. I'm really appreciative of your time. I'm gonna put.
Hannah, can I piggyback on something you just said?
Of course.
Really, I think the challenge is not necessarily the career pathway. It would be a great idea to give you an idea what level you're on and what opportunities you have. But we also didn't want that to align so much with regulation that it would pigeonhole a provider, because I can be a home provider and be far onto the pathway and have a master's degree and just choose to provide care to home providers. So I think your challenge to our group in a conversation that we need to have with childcare licensing, our program itself, is just really cleaning up our staff qualifications so that you can understand when you're looking at opening up a facility, it's easier to understand what the minimum staff qualifications are so that they align better with the career pathway, so that the career pathway should be its own entity to give all providers or anybody in the early childhood realm an opportunity to just sort of be who they are and where they want to be on that pathway. I hope that helps, because again, we did not want to intertwine it so much, but it gives me a good challenge of what we need to do as a program to make our staff qualifications just easier to navigate and understand. And so I really appreciate your question to Hannah, because it has my mind thinking of what we need to do independent of the career pathway.
Yeah, and then Hannah, this is only my second meeting on this committee. And so since you presented that, and I noticed on the header, it says not for distribution, are you wanting feedback from this committee to take a look at that initial document and kind of look at what the content is and be able to provide additional feedback? Or is this only just an update? I guess, what kind of action items can we help you with on that document?
Oh, well, that's a very interesting question. So more or less what I've presented is where it's going to be. We've been through, like I said, so this project really started almost exactly 2 years ago. And we've been through 2 rounds of feedback sessions. We have most, if not all of the state agencies that we interface with on a regular basis. So DCF, CCSIT, Child Care Aware, KDHE, KSDE, all of those large state agencies and then contracted have seen this, have been involved in the creation. We stood up a team, it's called the Professional Development Implementation Team, that has representation from people who are subject matter experts at each of those agencies to make sure that we're not just going off board, because I'm not a subject matter expert in licensing or professional development. They think I can, talk and organize. And so that's why I'm here, right? So we pulled together the people that actually know the stuff. There will be, I'm sure, opportunities for more feedback, probably specific to the development of those additional supports, ways that we can continue building out. And even if you have any suggestions or ideas about if there's resources that the workforce needs that we've not thought of, that is where we need help now, is help us make this implementation and delivery as successful as possible.
Go ahead, Emily.
Hi, so this is Emily Barnes. I'm provider in Olathe, Kansas, family provider. One of the things kind of to this point about the not pigeonhole, you need some help? Okay, friend. One of the things that I would add to this discussion about how it is used specifically for somebody outside of the field that, trying to assist the field. I'm hearing from colleagues who have in the past gotten trainings of, the ability to provide trainings based on their interest and experiences and training they've received. And then in the renewal process of that, you can be Sky in just a minute. Can I finish my thought? They are learning that they're no longer eligible to renew those trainings that they've created because they do not possess things like bachelor's degrees. And so one of the things I do think that we need to enter into this conversation is that when we have a system that does allow for coming into the paradigm without being sequential, we need to take into consideration that experience so that we don't pigeonhole and then take away abilities after we have some experience in the field, but not necessarily the professional credentialing. So that would be my thought on this end of that conversation.
Thank you, Emily. This is, I promise, the last thing I'm going to say, because I have now officially gone way over. So at some point, you may have seen that we had at level 5, it was called a certificate of mastery, and it was a recognition. It would not be, okay, so there are some issues with it. It wouldn't be portable. It wouldn't be stackable. If you moved to a different state, it would be no recognition. But it was a way that we could recognize experienced providers that choose not to go to college, because we know that we have some brilliant providers out there that's not for them. It's not interesting. It's not what they want to do. We had to table that for now. So we fully intend on creating some way to recognize experienced providers that choose not to go to college, or that's not an option for them, because we believe that that full-time on-the-job experience in companionship with maybe credentials, maybe professional learning, still makes a really high quality provider. So that is another future state thing that you and I might be talking about, because I want feedback in the future. So yeah, I never stop coming back. It's
yes, that
grueling.
is one thing I appreciate.
Yeah, you just keep seeing me. Okay, thank you, Megan. Thank you so much to this group. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Hannah. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Tanya and Mitch to share more about the Go Teams and Communities in Action Summit.
Thank you. And Mitch is going to start, and he's going to start us off with the Go Team. So I'm going to hand it to Mitch.
Okay. Well, hey, good to be here, everybody. Thanks for having us to talk a little bit about the Go Team. I'm Mitch Rucker, currently contracting with Childcare Aware of Kansas to work on the Childcare Go Team and get that set up and started. I previously worked at Kansas Action for Children, so that's why I see familiar faces here in the room. And so, yeah, excited to be back in this kind of new capacity and work on this new project. So the mission, of the Go Team is, I think, a shared one. It's to expand access to affordable, high quality childcare throughout Kansas, providing state level guidance and resources to implement locally driven solutions. So word salad, but the Go Team is there to help solve tangible, concrete issues, problems, as elevated by the communities that are trying to build their own childcare capacity in conjunction with the community outreach efforts and all of the other capacity building efforts in the state. So so kind of how they play together. Tanya, do you want to do this one or?
Sure,
Okay.
Absolutely. So we wanted to kind of look at how the community, the continuum of support in communities works. And it's important to know that the community is always the circle that we kind of all work around. So we have our community outreach and engagement teams that are the constant in communities. So they're there all the time, working side by side with communities throughout their entire process. Our Childcare Go Team is kind of the rapid response. They come in when there are needs and barriers. And then we still have our consultations that it might be the childcare health consultants, the infant toddler network through Kits and Casito. It might be professional development. Those are ongoing supports that are also available to communities and the childcare providers. But everything that we do is still around the community. It just depends on what it looks like. Oops.
Yeah, so here we have kind of an illustration, hopefully. So if we look at the bottom of kind of the screen here, obviously up top we have some of the various components that go into building childcare capacity. And then at the bottom, we think is kind of an illustration of the distinction, the difference between the communities in action and the childcare Go team. So if we look at the community outreach and engagement efforts, they're around, visioning what does the community need? What do we want to build? What do we want our early childhood education landscape to look like in our community? And that's a lot of work, visioning and figuring out where to go. And the community outreach engagement team is obviously there throughout the entire process. Where the Go teams would come in is when they run into a roadblock. So say, they run into an issue and they need some engineering expertise, to solve an issue with the building that they're trying to refit. And, so the Go team, would theoretically include some sort of architects, engineers, there that maybe work regionally, have some experience working in the area, and also have, experience, working with, building and designing childcare facilities. So, that's just kind of one of those targeted things. We help come in, solve that issue, and then we pop back out because there's probably another issue in a different county. And so that's kind of the different methods to the madness. So we have one that's continuous, that's relationship building, that is, going on again, theoretically, forever. As long as a community is growing, they're going to need more childcare. Thus, they're going to need to build their childcare capacity. Whereas the Go team is more discrete. It's kind of in and out saying, all right, you have this issue. We got somebody who knows how to fix that. So we do that, and then we pop back out and go somewhere else. That's kind of the dots versus the line. Tanya, do you have something to add there?
Nope, I think you did great. I think we can go to the next slide, which goes into the Communities in Action Summit. So the Communities in Action Summit is, it's a day-long event that we are hosting for our communities and our communities that have already attended a Communities in Action. This is those that previously attended the workshop. So it's an invite, we're inviting just that group back. The reason we're doing this is to draw from those communities' experiences and so that they can draw from each other. We're providing opportunities for those communities to learn what they've done, learn from each other, learn from those unique experiences. Then we will also give them an opportunity to sit back and look at their goals that they did during a Communities in Actions workshop. They do short-term and long-term goals, and they've been working on those since then. And see if they need to make some more short-term goals, or see if they need to tweak some of their long-term goals because they've learned something that another community has done. At the event. So they'll work with community coaches again, as they did the first time, and see if there's any goals they want to tweak or add. We'll have some experts in the room. Some state experts will be there in case they've got questions. Maybe they have a question that KDHE can answer. We'll have some resources there, or they need some question about subsidies. So like DCF will be there. So it'll be a day of the time that they can do that intentional work as a coalition and get some questions and be able to move forward. You want to advance to the next slide. These just kind of show us what the 22 communities that have the opportunity. We don't know who all will take it. We're getting those registrations to attend a community, the follow-up summit, because they've attended a Communities in Action. We've been doing them for right about a year now. So our colors are all funky on these. This is funny. So our summit agenda right now, they'll start with a panel. We are inviting a few people on the panel, some that will talk about childcare taxes, some of their childcare program that will talk about their experiences. We're getting a business person to come talk about how they look at their childcare, how they help childcare for their employees, and then a community that really has been looking and supporting the Community Childcare Coalition, and they just keep moving forward. It doesn't matter what bumps they hit, what challenges they hit, how they just keep moving forward. We'll be doing the peer rapid connections so that they can learn from each other. And then their sessions, then we will pull them back together so that they can work on their short-term and long-term goals. And I hope that will be what they can come back together. This is information if you want to reach out and get, if you know a community that needs some assistance, they can email the community support. And then there's my email and Mitch's email if you have questions for us, or I don't know how much time, if you want them to just email us questions or if you want to ask questions now, we're good with whatever. I know we're kind of crunched for time.
Yeah, I think if anybody has a quick question now, we can take them, but appreciate you sharing your contact information.
Yep.
And just as a reminder for people, this really started as an idea, I think, from this group and with childcare licensing conversations. And so it is, it's really not been that many months since the conversation started, and major kudos to everybody who's actually taken this idea and brought it to life. And it's very, very exciting to see your team at Childcare Aware really running with this. So thank you for the work. And just want to remind people, like, sometimes a little idea in a conversation really leads to something that really builds momentum quickly.
Absolutely.
Hey, Tanya, can you share? Because I think the number is just really telling to where we are moving in our state. How many communities you anticipate in November and how many participants? Because I mean, every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, this is just amazing of what we're going to do or in November. So if you don't mind sharing that number.
Not at all. So we're inviting 22 communities in November, and we're actually limiting them on how many participants they can bring because of the size of a venue, as you can imagine. So we're estimating about 200 community members is what we've maxed it at, because that's about the size of the venue we could find and make it meaningful. We start getting too many people. We don't have enough individuals to have one person at each of the community members' tables, because that's important to us. That's one thing that makes it successful, is for us to have we call them a community coach at the table when they are doing their planning and their work. So we're looking at about 200 community members there in November is what we figured.
And we're hoping to share if there's something really unique that the CCSIT team can take up as a mantle. We will share with you guys, but this is a very unique opportunity to move the conversation along regarding needs in the state of Kansas. So I'm really excited to participate, and the reason why we will not be hosting the CCSIT on our traditional Tuesday, because there will be quite a handful of members who will be participating. So I wanted to bring that into context to everybody of what we will actually be doing that day is very meaningful work.
Absolutely. The community coaches will take notes when they're sitting with the community for two reasons. One is so that the community can just talk and kind of visit, but also that helps us to know what barriers might exist so that the Go team will be able to kind of have some ideas. And then we can bring those back and know if there's some systems that we need to look at. So.
Thank you, Tanya, for indulging me.
Absolutely, anytime.
Megan, I'll pass it back to you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I do. We participated in the original first round of the Communities in Action workshop. And I know that there's a handful of communities that are having these discussions. Is there a list that Childcare Aware or somebody has that says this is the focus that this community is having, the next county over is focusing on this, the county 10 counties away is focusing on XYZ and how they're approaching the problem? Because these coalitions are happening, but sometimes you don't always need to meet just to hear what other people are doing. Sometimes it's nice to be able to have access to just a list of information. And then also their contact information. So then that way with us here in Manhattan, if I have a question for somebody in Saline County, I know exactly who my contact is and I can reach out and say, hey, how is that initiative going? You're doing X, Y, Z. So sometimes those things can happen, not just in a workshop, but just having that information easily accessible.
You are absolutely right. And we are working on that. So we're working on putting together, we call it a short story or synopsis of what counties are doing. And then getting permission to share, like have them tell us who they would like as a contact person and getting permission to share that and how they would like somebody to reach out to them. Some of our really rural counties have smaller coalitions, as you can imagine, and that their main, we call them their champion, their champion member may be like a kindergarten teacher who maybe won't want a phone call, maybe email would be best. So we're working on getting all of that put together so that we can start sharing that and get permission from them. So it's a great thought. We're right there with you, and we are working on pulling all of that together so that we can get that shared out. Any additional? If none, don't hesitate to email us and reach out. Give us a call at Child Care of Kansas. We would love to hear from you and help if you need it.
Thank you so much to Tanya and Mitch for sharing. This is very exciting, and we look forward to following along. And of course, if our team can help in any way, please don't hesitate to come back and visit us.
Sounds great. Thank you for having us.
Of course. Okay. So we are going to switch gears. I know that was a lot of information, but we wanted to make sure people, there's just so much happening in the system, and we want to make sure we're providing opportunities for people to see connections. So with that, we're going to pivot into what this group is going to focus on over the next few months. We have heard loud and clear, which is wonderful, that this group wants to work. And I think this group has done a lot of wonderful work thus far, and we certainly want to keep the momentum going. So we sent a survey out a couple weeks ago. We had some great ideas about what this group could really tackle over the next few months. So I'm going to switch and pull up the Jamboard here in just a minute. But as you're looking at the ideas, we really want to talk about which of these topics feel most relevant to the childcare systems improvement team, which feel the most relevant to childcare licensing. We know there are a lot of issues that cross childcare more broadly, and we want to make sure that we are keeping that connection to childcare licensing, and also recognize that there are a lot of other people doing great work within the system as well, so we can complement and coordinate with them. What's missing? This is, I think, a good starting list, but probably not fully comprehensive. And then we'll talk about which of these topics feel like they have the highest priority, and then with that, we're going to look at, does it make sense for them to be work groups like we've done in the past? Does that make more sense to do like each month? We'll have a kind of a topic that the full group will discuss. So we will share the board here and then just kind of get your reactions. And Clayton put the questions in the chat. Thank you, Clayton. And I think Clayton is going to share his screen, and I will put a link to this board in the chat. If you're not familiar with Jamboard, you should be able to just open it up, and then you can add ideas as we go along.
And just a note, some of these recommended topics were a bit too long to have in a sticky note on here. So if you have questions, feel free to ask, and maybe we can expand upon one of the ones that were cut off if needed.
All right, so looks like people are able to join the Jamboard. It's okay if you're not. So I know this is a lot of information, so I'm going to give people a minute to kind of be able to review some of these, and then really just start with, anybody who wants to share things that really jump out to you as something that feels like you want to dig into in the next few months. I don't know if Melissa or Jarvis, if you want to comment on any of these, or if you want to just open the floor to everyone.
Love to hear from them. The systems improvement team is a support to childcare licensing. So this is your voice and opportunity. We may have to streamline some of the thoughts later on, but I say let's just open it up and let the conversation begin.
Sounds good. All right.
So Megan, with that being said, are you eliciting if there's an idea that somebody finds really intriguing to, so this would springboard us into potentially work groups and then looking at how we tailor those ideas?
Yes, exactly. I want to give
Okay.
people a chance to, I know this is a lot of text, so I want to make sure people
Oh
have a
yeah, no,
chance to
I
kind
just wanted to make sure as everybody
of course.
leaning into their screen so they can see better. I have bifocals, so I am doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really a time to kind of say this feels like something that's either of interest or something I really want to dig into. I think we will then figure out, does it make sense? You know, kind of what's the format we want to do that in. Some of these I think might make more sense as like breakout conversations. Some of these, you know, you'll see the word presentation on a few things. So I would worry less about kind of, is it the right fit for one format? I think we can figure that out, but more what feels like the right kind of topics for this group to be working on. We're saying over the next few months, I wouldn't worry too much about time. I think it's really like what feels like the most pressing need for some effort to be, you know, for us to allocate some time for. So feel free to put your thoughts in the chat. I saw one just came through, or come off mute and just see what people think. Bethany said in the chat, I like this one, creation of brief video for childcare licensing homepage that talks about basic process of getting licensed. Emily pointed out, and I think this is probably true of others, Emily, that there's one that talks about active engagement with providers and that many other stickies could fall under that. So I think, certainly, and that's come up a lot in this group, like, who are the parties that are engaging with providers? What does that look like? What are the strategies to increase that level of engagement?
Megan, Emily had her hand up too.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Thank you. Go ahead, Emily.
After I had put the thought in the chat, I raised my hand, and mostly just to make that point of, you know, making sure that we find a way to actively engage with the licensed community, whether that be the center directors or the family providers in their homes. But I think we also need to talk about the difference between informing and engaging. That, you know, hey friend, can you scoot back? I know you want to be a part of the picture, don't you? A lot of times we applaud ourselves on the information that goes out, but then we forget about the conversation that can also go along. And so making sure that we take it to the next step. It's not just the information that's going out, but the active conversation, whether through Zoom town halls or whatever, or subgroup, you know, like subcommittees that actively are working to communicate with the workforce. I would like to see that happen.
Thank you for clarifying, because I think that you're right, those are different things. Okay, a couple more comments in the chat. Can we discuss on how we can improve communication between surveyors and ECEs? What does this look like? How can this be done better or differently? So I think that not quite the same as the engagement, but I think related to Emily's comment. Looking at regulations and practices that support inclusive placements for all children. Okay. I really like the idea of a toolkit for center-based applicants. Also another sticky said looking at regulations versus best practices that could be helpful. Okay. Looks like we've got, I think the good news is we have a lot of good ideas. Okay, Dawn, I believe the coordination of fire marshal office is a need across all licensed programs. So that's a good consideration. Are we making sure we're covering across the board? I will also note, I don't think we're saying that if we prioritize any of these over the next few months that we're going to lose these ideas. The beauty of Jamboard is we can come back. I think these are all really important. So don't feel like you're potentially going to lose something. I think it's just a matter of narrowing it over the next few months.
Megan, I would love to challenge us to look at the sticky notes that fall under possibly regulation barriers, such as the one that spoke to training approved by the secretary. It's just as frustrating on the surveyor side to say, is this training approved? Because it's sort of gray. So I think that would be something that would be great for this team to look at and then make recommendations to the program. So anything that seems to be in the regulation realm would be really good to that we can look at through the promulgation process or policy exceptions or just clarity. Like, what does this actually mean? So it's not something that's hidden, because we want programs to just have as much information as we do. So they take meaningful training, especially with their career pathway coming on board, not just to do it because KDHE is requiring it.
Absolutely. All right, still got some more ideas coming in. Streamlined data management that spans across all entities in early childhood education. Regulations matching best practices is important. Daniel noted the parallels, but also the differences between early childhood and the K-12 world. And I think kind of noting that there's still some pretty big challenges with that. And also noted making the comments about making professional learning meaningful. Okay, so I want to get us to a place where we can kind of start narrowing in, because again, I think there's a wealth of ideas here, which is fantastic, and we can certainly keep coming back to this as we're ready to move forward. But are there topics that feel that anybody kind of wants to like really push for as a focus area over the next, let's just say three months? And again, that could be a work group, that could be just a one-time conversation. I think we can figure out what the format is. I will admit that there's a way to make a little check mark on Jamboard, and Clayton and I were admittedly struggling with how to do that this morning. But if anybody knows how to do that on Jamboard, I would welcome your expertise. Okay, so active engagement, Emily. Is there a specific sticky that you're thinking, or would you like to be able to kind of brainstorm what else can we do to increase engagement opportunities?
I need to go back into the Jamboard. I've gotten out of it.
Sure.
I know that there was one that dealt with like communication between surveyors and licensees. Certainly that I think the work that we heard about earlier, as concerning things like Go Team and community engagement partners, things like that. I think we have the vehicles by which to use them. I think we need to get the dedicated group figured out. And so whether that's a work group within the CIT, which I mean, personally, I'd love to see that, is, do we have that? And I think from opening up that conversation, we'll find a lot of topics that the workforce is interested in discussing and getting feedback and giving feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bethany said in the chat, I agree with Emily, that would help inform the other conversations, such as those around regulations. Having provider interest will encourage their involvement. So I think we can just keep it pretty general. And I mean, I think that engagement can mean a lot of different things.
Right. I think that it's unwise to make a decision at this point of what engagement means.
Agreed.
Before
I agree.
we actually engage with everybody.
I agree. No, I think keeping it open. That certainly sounds like it could be a work group that could dig into a lot of different things and probably touch several ideas on these stickies. So that's great. Anything else? Anybody seeing any patterns of things that maybe a work group could kind of tackle a few of these, or that there's the relationship between the two? As a reminder, in the past, we have had a standing work group on regulatory, I'm blanking on the actual name, but essentially regulatory barriers and best practices. And I think to Melissa's point, that doesn't necessarily mean proposing regulation changes. It could also be, how can there be improved clarity around this, or really kind of trying to help people understand what is this supposed to mean, where are there exceptions, if so, where are there kind of communication strategies. I think given the role of the CIT with childcare licensing, continuing a group like that could make sense to kind of then dig into more of the regulatory and regulatory adjacent issues. We've also had groups that have been more focused on like the workforce and recruitment and retention. We've had groups that have been more focused on the community-driven childcare. Yes, Adrian, I would agree. So there seem to be a few about communication between surveyors and providers, as well as regulations and best practices. I think that those are two common themes for sure. Christie's question, who is working on livable wages or subsidies for childcare? There is quite a bit of work happening in terms of the workforce pieces. I think the wages, I mean, it's a big conversation on livable wages. I don't think we could say one exact, I think there are several groups working on that. Daniel, I don't know if I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're able to share any more about that, that would be great.
Looking ahead to the legislative session, we're looking at kind of putting forth a series of menu items to boost childcare access and salaries or livable wages for providers, with potential price tags put on them so that legislators can easily see different options that might be out there and ways that we can move forward with those different options. This is still really early in the process, but it is something that is a priority and we're working on for this upcoming session.
Thank you.
Megan, do you have a sticky note for provider supports? Because there's a lot of comments on technical assistance and like training videos. And maybe it's just, again, that's clarity because we do have a lot of programs at the table here today, like the Health Consultant Network, CCSIT, just in a different package in a way that we are getting that information to providers. But if it seems to be a common thread, and so we should probably look at least trying to figure out what sticky notes align with that to make sure that we are all getting as much information as we can out to our regulated community.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good way to create an umbrella for several of our stickies. I know one that we talked about, and I know somebody said they really like this, was, we were working on finalizing the toolkit for home-based applicants. I think the toolkit for center-based that we've talked about could fall under that, as well as several other things. So, and we'll take as we're, I don't know, Clayton's doing this live, but we'll also do a review afterward and try to kind of group these together. It looks like we've got potentially at least 3 solid categories right now that I think a lot of these could fall under. And I think, again, some of them could be, typically the structure of the SIT has been that we are together as a full group for part of the meeting and then go into work groups. I know there have been seems to be some interest in different presentations, so we can make sure that if that doesn't make sense to put into a full work group, that could still be brought into the SIT as well.
I have some items that I would like to bring forward. One of them is, it is amazing the amount of physical paper copies that providers have to keep on hand. I feel like as a parent, I'm constantly filling out paperwork, and my providers, when they show me the binders of papers that they have to have on hand when a licensor comes to their home, it is insane. This is 2022, and the fact that we don't have a way to streamline and catalog that data in an electronic format, so then that way it maximizes the licensor's time when they're on site, because I've heard just our own licensing group, they cover multiple counties, and they don't even have enough staff to go out and investigate complaints. And so how do we streamline data in a meaningful way that makes it easier to track everyone's continuing education, forms, as a parent, like vaccination status, food program participation, all of those things. The state has my children's information in multiple entities. Why we are not putting things together and maximizing everyone's resources and time is something that we really should consider. Now, some of that bleeds outside of the SIT team, and I understand that, but we do have some people on the SIT team that represent those organizations. But I think we can truly make a meaningful impact if we look at how we can have all the continuing education. If you're already doing some of it online, why can your paperwork not also be managed online? And then that way the state can see who has expiring licenses, continuing education, that kind of thing. So in the architecture industry, all of our licensing is all done online. Same thing with accountants, attorneys. If we want to have childcare education or early childhood providers also seen as professionals, it starts internally and how we manage the profession. And so I would really love to see that come to the forefront of how we can start having a lot of that when we already have that information online, more easily accessible for all the parties involved.
So Natalie, I can speak to the fact that we are, the Kansas is working on a professional development repository. There's a lot of systems that play into it, but we do actually have a project system moving forward. Facilities do not have to have everything by paper. We accept electronic versions of everything. So it's just a matter of interpretation and we have lots of facilities that do everything actually online. And you're right, it does save time because I just go up, look at a computer, touch a few things, and I'm able to look at that. So we do allow that for providers now. But could we make our forms just a little bit easier? Probably. So I do appreciate your comments. But I do want to, in the chat, one of the things I really would want to bring back to is Riva's, just to keep us streamlined of the purpose of the SIT team and making sure that we stay within the parameters of the SIT team and what and who we support. I'm just going to read it. One thing I am trying to wrap my head around is which of these items on this board really are childcare licensing matters for the systems improvement team, and which are perhaps broader topics, which although they are very important, but may be beyond regulatory or licensing issues. So as we do this, we will have to truncate some of these that don't align, that are the bigger workforce. We cannot address pay equity. That is just not something KDHE dips into. We look at, can keep our doors open? Do we have qualified staff? So where do some of those issues go within our context of our early childhood governance in the state of Kansas, and just moving those issues forward? So just really appreciate, Riva, thank you for dropping that into the chat, because I think Natalie's comments before we came on board, we're all within the licensing realm. So I appreciate that. So just as we look at the sticky notes and we put them, just please keep that in mind of the mission. And Emily, you have your hand up, just wanting to make sure that wasn't just left up, or if you have an additional comment you'd like to share.
It is to the point of the electronic stuff. Luckily last year, electronic forms were accepted by last year's surveyor, but I have had it in the past where I did in fact receive a violation because I had documents electronically, and I was told that because I did not have it on the premises, that the electronic copy, whether it was in the cloud or the email or whatever, even though the intent had been to make sure that I had it, that was not sufficient. So I would say as a training issue with surveyors, well, remember, we're going to have lunch here in just a minute, okay? Lunch is cooking. We're just having a tiny snack to keep our bellies happy. Sorry. So just ensuring that there is consistent training across the board, so that providers are not getting in trouble when they have the forms electronically, but it's not being accepted because it's not on the premises.
No, I appreciate that, Emily, and love your comment, because I heard my stomach rumble, and I wish I was at your daycare having a little snack also. So you have just brought to all of the SIT team very reality of what a provider deals with, and you're doing an excellent job. And I just appreciate your participation today and giving us a little glimpse into your daycare world.
Yeah,
so I will let you guys finish, keep moving your sticky notes.
Well, I think that's a great example, Emily, of like something that's not necessarily a proposed change. I mean, it could be, but it is really like, how can there be some information that's put forth? Like I think of last year, one of really the most simple recommendations that came out of this group was that staff qualifications chart, and just making sure it was actually in the hands of providers. So I think bringing those issues to light of Natalie, from a parent's perspective, this is what I'm experiencing. Emily and others, this is what I'm experiencing as a provider. How can we make sure that we're pulling those, elevating those things and saying either, oh, this is something that needs to be changed, or it's really an interpretation issue. So there needs to be some work to make sure that information is more clear for people. So I think those are very real examples of things that absolutely relate to childcare licensing that this group can discuss. I want to highlight one comment that I think I thought was particularly interesting in the, it came up in the last meeting, and then it came up through the surveyors as well, of what's the relationship between childcare licensing and provider recruitment. So that, I'm not sure, that could, I think, fall into maybe provider supports. But I just thought that was interesting. There's a sticky down toward the bottom of I think there's a fine line between what childcare licensing can do with recruitment and retention, but we have talked more about retention than we have about recruitment, I would say, in this group. And so I just wanted to raise that as an interesting comment we've heard from a couple different places.
So just being somebody who's new and trying to catch up on everything, in the last CIT meeting, it was mentioned that there was 14 regulatory or comments made on different regulations and how they're either being changed or addressed. Is that information going to be pushed out soon? Because I'd love to see the change that you've made in recommendations, and in chatting with our in-home family providers in the area, as well as our daycare center directors in the area. I'm on a child care task force in our community. So in talking about these kinds of things, there's still other regulations that I think some people are curious about how we can make a positive impact while keeping safety at the front of our minds. So I'd love to know what you've already done. And then do we already have a list of things that we want to tackle from a regulation standpoint in the next following 6 months?
So I will tackle part of that, and then Melissa, please jump in, because I don't think I can fully answer that. So the 14 recommendations actually were not regulatory specific. Well, that's not entirely true. They were not targeted at specific regulations. They were really recommendations in general for childcare licensing. And to answer your question, yes, we are working on and hope to share soon an online a Google Drive for all members to have access to, so that you can easily access meeting minutes, agendas, as well as the recommendations from last year, so that it's just none of us can remember all of this. So yes, you'll absolutely be able to have that. In the meantime, we can send those recommendations out via email, just so you have them. So thank you for that question. Melissa, I don't know if you want to respond to, like, if you have kind of a running regulatory list.
We do. The program is continuously looking for improvement on their through the promulgation process of all program types. Remember, we license 8 different program types. We do have available, which I love to be able to share, and just a reminder to all of the CIT teams. So when you're speaking to your partners, the Bureau of Family Health has an open survey on our website, and it's just specifically in the CCL on the CCL website also of specifically eliciting feedback regarding a regulation. So you are able to say why you feel this regulation is either a barrier, outdated, and quite frankly, maybe doesn't align with best practice anymore, and you actually want a more stringent regulation in place. But what we're asking is, what is the economic impact at your level, the perception in your world? And then what would your proposed change be? I think this is an active partnership, because it not only engages, I may not like this reg, but then tell me what you don't like about it, so that we can have this really good, meaningful conversation. We review that as an agency. And then specifically as a program, we will use that data as we move forward and highlight what regulations we need to target as a review. As many of you have been partners in early childhood and childcare licensing for a long time, we haven't done a major regulation overhaul since Lexi's Law in 2012, which mostly impacted supervision, safe sleep, and health and safety. So that was a major program change. And so really looking at tackling based off of good scientific data of where we are now. So Natalie, encourage you I can send you the link to that website and that survey, so that you can, as you're looking at regulations, you can say, hey, wake up at midnight, want to add a comment to KDHE. I'm just going to use that website as a great repository to start that conversation.
Thank you for this comment, Reba. I think this is a great point. So essentially making sure that these ideas don't get lost, and thinking about how can we, if it doesn't make sense within the scope of the childcare systems improvement team, elevating that to other groups in the early childhood governance structure, or just across the system. We know there are a lot of groups working on workforce issues. We heard about the career pathways and the registry and the work on several groups are doing on wages. So making sure that we're being clear about who's kind of taking that conversation. So I think that's absolutely something we can work on, Reba, of if it doesn't feel like it's right, or at least right for now, within the systems improvement team, kind of making sure that that's not just being lost. And actually, Melissa is going to be presenting at the early childhood recommendations panel this week, to kind of remind people of what this group has been up to, and make sure that that door is always open, for us to be able to take things to that group, and vice versa. I think if there are, just like we heard with the Go team, if there are other areas that and initiatives where this group can help be part of the conversation, we want to make sure that we're helping facilitate those connections. So I really appreciate that point. All right, I know we are quickly getting toward the end of our time. So are there any final comments before we wrap up?
Natalie, we will add that survey link to the meeting notes so everybody has it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We will take all of this, we will clean it up, so that we can kind of pull some of these thoughts together and then figure out what the best format is moving forward. The Jamboard is still accessible though, so if you think of something after today, feel free to add to it or feel free to email me directly. As a reminder, our November meeting will be on Thursday, November 17th. It'll be a morning meeting again, and because we know several people will be in Lindsborg on that Tuesday for the Communities in Action Summit. Yeah, any final thoughts from anybody else before we wrap up? Okay. Well, we know this is a lot of information today and a lot to digest. We really appreciate it. We will get notes out to everybody, as well as all the materials that we mentioned that we'll include. And like I said, we are working actively on a way for you to be able to access that quickly and easily. But if you have thoughts on other ways for us to share information with you that's most effective, we would certainly welcome them. So thank you so much for your engagement today, and hope you have a great afternoon.